SNP supporter Austin Sheridan, former Scottish editor of the Daily Telegraph Alan Cochrane, and Commons leader of Alex Salmond's Albert Party Neil Hanvey do battle in the clash. With Harry and Meghan giving coronation organisers a headache by selfishly refusing to confirm their attendance, should the King revoke the treacherous pair's invites? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, weigh in. Also on the way, Olympic medalist and fierce women's rights campaigner Sharon Davies reveals why she's boycotting Nike after the company sparked global outrage by paying a biological man to model their women's leggings and sports bra. Sharon joins me live in the next hour. And as Channel 4 runs a sick naked education show...
Elliot, you've got naked people standing in front of you.
Yes, I do.
Is this a new thing, a new experience? I'm guessing it probably is.
Yeah, it is a bit.
Bizarre, truly bizarre. And the militant National Education Union forces schools to support drag queen story time. Why is the left-wing establishment intent on pushing their extreme gender ideology on children? Former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe gives her unflinching verdict soon. And what's the BBC guilty of spouting pro-lockdown propaganda to protect its funding?
In the BBC, I know for certain that there were a variety of opinions, but the one which they chose to concentrate on was that the lockdown was a great idea.
We'll debate the dangers of the anti-democratic licence fee later in the show, as ever as well. Stay tuned. First look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press, and the final Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the week will be crowned too. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Thank you for joining us tonight, live on Britain's News Channel. Just a programming note, business as usual here on GB News over the weekend, and I will be back on Easter Monday at 9 p.m, so do join us then. Before we kick off tonight's show, though, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight, efforts to weed out hundreds of potentially corrupt police officers from Britain's biggest force are underway. Counter-terrorism officers, along with those who tackle serious organised crime, have been drafted in to help clean up the Metropolitan Police. Of more than 1,000 cases, nearly 700 will now be reassessed, with almost 200 referred to formal risk management or vetting. Former senior investigating officer at the Met, Simon Harding, says vetting should be an absolute priority.
Taken away that kind of process of vetting, which helped identify people at a very early stage. Yes, people would get through. When you cross over from force to force, because you're already sort of branded, if you like, a police officer, the vetting levels aren't necessarily as high as they would be. So, and that can cause a problem. But the intelligence that comes with that person should follow them, obviously, and you should be able to see that. But, you know, I still think there's, and I think everyone does, the level of vetting needs to be much, much stronger.
Well, police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry on Easter Monday. That's after MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe following the shooting of senior detective John Caldwell. The PSNI says there's strong intelligence that attacks are being planned. A man who murdered his pregnant wife by pushing her off the edge of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh has been jailed for 20 years. CCTV images have been released showing Kashif Anwar and his wife Fawzia Javed walking behind him. The 29-year-old pushed his wife, who was 17 weeks pregnant, down the hill. She fell 50 feet and sustained multiple blunt force injuries. But before dying, she managed to tell a passing woman that her husband had been behind the attack. Now, there's been violence on the streets of Paris today as protesters continue to demonstrate against the proposed pension bill. They set fire to one of President Emmanuel Macron's favourite restaurants and clashed with riot police. There have been pockets of violence in France since January, but the protests have so far been mostly peaceful. And finally, the King has signalled his support for a search into the British monarchy's historical links with transatlantic slavery. But King Charles and the Queen Consort were today at a Maundy Thursday service in York, where the monarch presented specially minted coins to local people, thanking them for their outstanding Christian service. The royals were greeted by well-wishers, as well as a handful of demonstrators who were holding banners reading, "Not my King." That's the news. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ and radio, and also on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News. Back now to Dan Wootton tonight.
On days like this, oh, how I long for the calm, unwavering and timeless certainty of the late, great Queen Elizabeth II to guide the royal family, the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth through the process of modernisation without giving in to the destructive forces who simply want to tear it all down. I think the King has fallen into the Guardian's trap, and I fear it could have grave consequences. So today, Charles officially came out in support of this Guardian-backed project investigating the monarchy's historical links with transatlantic slavery. A Buckingham Palace spokesperson told The Guardian this is an issue that His Majesty takes profoundly seriously, before adding that process has continued with vigour and determination since His Majesty's accession. As part of that drive, the royal household is supporting this research through access to the royal collection and the royal archives. Now, that follows this statement Charles made to the Commonwealth Heads of Government reception in Rwanda last year.
I cannot describe the depths of my personal sorrow at the suffering of so many, as I continue to deepen my own understanding of slavery's enduring impact.
Now, that sentiment might be right, but King Charles needs to wise up to the nefarious forces behind this campaign, who want nothing less than the royal family and the United Kingdom itself to be made bankrupt via historic reparations for the sins of our fathers centuries ago. Today's bombshell statement was prompted by The Guardian being handed a document showing a transfer of £1,000 of shares in the slave-trading Royal African Company in 1689 from Edward Colston to King William III. Now, here's where things get dodgy. That document was discovered by Dr. Brooke Newman, a historian at Virginia Commonwealth University, who is currently writing a book called The Queen's Silence, which is expected to be highly critical of Charles's late mother. Here's the key line from The Guardian's report on the matter. She was commissioned as a consultant by The Guardian's Cotton Capital Project, which has investigated this newspaper's links to the enslavement of African people. So, just as I predicted, The Guardian's self-flagellation last month over its own slave links, which resulted in a pathetic £10 million payment over a decade, was part of a much wider project to bring the reparation debate to the fore in other British organisations, including the royal family. Now, Dr. Newman has today told The Guardian her research shows clear evidence of the British monarchy's central involvement in the slave trade and the procurement of its modern-day wealth. She said there is no doubt that the centuries of investment in African slavery and the slave trade contributed hugely to building the status, prestige and fortune of today's royal family. There's no mention of Britain being the first in the world to ban slavery, of course. And the real intentions of Dr. Newman, who I asked on the show tonight and she refused to appear, they could not be clearer. A rabid anti-monarchist, she claims everyone in Britain has benefited from the slave trade. Her work as a historian has been dedicated to destroying the Windsors. Indeed, one of her many incendiary articles, headlined "Throne of Blood," was posted on the BLM UK website and featured one of her countless demands for slavery reparations from the royal family. A crystal clear vision into her destructive world view. Mere hours after the late Queen died, Newman was spouting Republican bile about Her Majesty. She was criticising the British people for fawning over our greatest ever monarch before insisting she wasn't universally beloved and questioning her legacy because she failed to apologise for her ancestors' role in slavery. Oh, and guess what? Guess what? You won't be surprised by this. She's a fully paid up member of the Sussex squad, towing the tired old line that Meghan was a victim of racism in Britain and accusing the late Queen of letting her down. The American academic's mission to destroy the monarchy led her to work as a consultant with the British-born comedian John Oliver in November 2022, helping the lefty Liberal presenter script Republican attack lines like this.
The royal family's wealth, unlike their gene pool, is massive. They're like a human appendix. We've long evolved past needing them, and there's a compelling case for their surgical removal. They'll sit atop a pile of stolen wealth, wearing crowns adorned with other countries' treasures.
Dr. Newman even predicted that Charles's reign would herald the end of the Commonwealth and the monarchy as we know it. And that's why the king has to be so careful here. Look at who he's dealing with. Look at who he's giving into. And if he accepts the Guardian's narrative, which he has, unfortunately, the drumbeat and demands for reparations from what the hard left around the world continue to see as the walking, talking representation of colonialism, the British royal family, might become too loud to ignore. And who suffers then? Let me think. Who suffers then? Is Charles really going to give up Buckingham Palace, Balmoral, Sandringham, his helicopters, his staff and his Duchy of Cornwall profits? Or will it be everyday Brits who are made poorer? We know the answer to that. So, King Charles, please stop trying to reason with the hard-left Guardian and their ilk. They want to destroy you and everything that makes Britain great in the process. But to respond now, my superstar panel. The author and top Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, top Tory Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Alison Pearson, look, I want to support King Charles. I desperately want to support him. This is such an important time for the monarchy. But I'm very concerned that he gave this statement today in response to the Guardian article, when the Guardian article is prompted by a woman who hates his mother and wants to bring down the monarchy.
Yes, I think we could see, Dan, couldn't we, from that speech, a good speech he gave in Rwanda last year. He's a very decent man. He wants to be sensitive. He wants to be inclusive. That's all very admirable. I think he's getting extremely bad advice. Been a couple of decisions recently which have really offended monarchists like myself. And I'm wondering, why is he favouring people who hate the royal family and want to bring it down? Why is he pandering to them when people like me find this abhorrent? I think there's no end to it. The minute you concede the principle that he should be making historic reparations, those people, however many grovelling apologies, if he offers them Kensington Palace, they'll say, oh, no, that's not enough. Let's have Windsor Castle. Let's have Balmoral. Let's have the Koh-i-Noor Diamond. It just goes on and on. And they don't want a nice solution, do they? They don't want this kindly man to make amends. They are pernicious. They are fighting to cause division. And it really bothers me. And as you said, this woman, Dr. Brooke Newman, has a track record of being incredibly unpleasant. When I read that she'd accused the British people of fawning over the Queen the day after she died, I mean, the king should have nothing to do with a person like that.
No, absolutely, Sean Bailey. And it's the Commonwealth that she wants to destroy as well. And I just wonder, when King Charles decided to give this statement to The Guardian today, did he really think about the type of people who he was empowering?
I hope he did. Look, if you go back to the statements he made in Rwanda, it was a very personal statement. And in some sense, this is a continuation of that. And these people are not going to stop. So when he says, OK, we'll have a look, he in his own mind must know where he's going to draw the line, or it will just keep going on. And of course, it could highlight some of the more complicated things around reparations. For instance, who do they give the money to? How much do they give? The British taxpayer has already paid, because if you look at what happened historically, basically the British taxpayer bought the freedom of African slaves. So the taxpayer can argue they've already paid. You talk about getting Windsor Castle. Well, actually, we own Windsor Castle, not King Charles. So I think it's going to be very complicated.
So it's British citizens that would suffer.
It'll always be us who pays, just be clear. But I think what's important here, he has to have this little look, and then he needs to go back and say, right, here's the results as I see them, not as you dictate. Because whatever they dictate will be a story to continue it, not any kind of resolution.
But even if he wants to do this, Alison, he shouldn't be marching to the beat of the Guardian's drum. That's what's mad.
No, and of course it's this particular allegation is 1686. William of Orange. I mean, how give us a break? How long have we got to have? But that's what I'm seeing, Dan. We saw with the case of Lady Susan Hussey, didn't we? An allegation made against the Queen's most loyal servant, very devoted friend to the royal family. Chucked under a bus the minute some woman, Ngozi Fulani, turns up at the palace as that woman.
Also a registered. Look, what needs to
tell me
happen
what she is, Sean.
She's a registered royal hater, that's for sure. But here's the key.
Exactly. Start wising up, Charles, that you will never be able to reason with the people who want to destroy you.
What you're making about never reasoning is very clear, because let's be clear, The Guardian had a look at their historical links to slavery, didn't like the outcome and tried to silence the people who did the study.
Now, look, Amy Nicole, I've missed you these last couple of weeks. I've missed you.
What's been going
what
on?
a story.
What's new? Have you stopped the boats yet?
What a story for you to return to, because this is your dream, isn't it? This is your dream. A Guardian-loving king.
Do you know what? I disagree, because this is making me really feel King Charles. I love this kind of empathetic King Charles, climate change, activist King Charles, because this is what we want. We want a monarch who takes into account the problems that people have with the monarchy. That's the key to keeping them relevant and the modernisation of the royal family. So if King Charles...
So would you be happy to bankrupt the country then with billions and billions in reparations?
So I noticed in your monologue that you confidently said, we know the answer to that. It'll be the taxpayer and not King Charles.
Correct.
I disagree with that completely. King Charles is absolutely loaded. I think what he's going to do is going to find out exactly what his family's role was in the slave trade, which is undeniable.
Well, you don't know that.
And then he's going to give a token, an acknowledgement in some form to the nation.
Like the Guardian's pathetic £10 million, which amounted to 0.01% of their turnover.
It's taking responsibility for this history.
No, it's not. It's pathetic virtue signalling.
That always captures me when it comes to this particular subject is that the taxpayer repaid the slave owners until 2015. The ancestors of the people involved in the slave trade, the families of the slaves were paying back.
Do you think the slave trade was limited to the UK?
We're talking about the UK today, though. I know you could talk about Spain, France, them, but that is theirs to deal with. We're talking about Britain.
But no one's dealing with that, are they? They're dealing with us. They're dealing with us because they hate the British royal family, because they view it as like the pinnacle of colonialism. No one's talking about all of the African countries which continued with the slave trade for decades and decades longer. I mean, without the UK, we would never have seen the world.
But that's pure and simple. What about it?
No, Amy, that's important. If you're going to talk about slaves, if you're going to talk about African slaves, of which I'm a descendant, you have to talk about everybody. Because if you don't, it just seems like a political attack, which means it's invalid. If the Spanish had African slaves, if the Americans, if the French, the Portuguese, the Arabs, they need to be spoken about as well.
Well, then perhaps we could lead the way on this topic.
No, because otherwise it's just a money-making scheme.
Amy, can I just remind you, we did lead the way.
Yeah.
That's the point. If the UK had not abolished the slave trade in full in 1833, but actually the work behind that had been going on really for 3 decades beforehand. Well, actually, ever since the late 1700s. The rest of the world never would. I mean, it's fascinating. So the UK fully abolished slavery by 1833. France abolished it in 1848. Netherlands in 1861. The US in 1865. Cuba 1866. Brazil 1888. You know, Britain should actually be held up around the world as the driving force for ending slavery.
Do you know what's important about this activity as well? British sailors died enforcing this. British taxpayer paid for
thousands of British sailors.
And that's why Charles doing this, OK, he should do it. He should do it, but let's have a fair look at it. Because what I don't want is communities within this who've suffered from it, like my community, then being vilified for something else.
What Amy's saying about the fact that he can be popular and modern by addressing these concerns, they're not the concerns, Amy, of all people. What, as Dan said in the introduction, what Queen Elizabeth did was she kept away from these highly contentious political issues which the British people don't agree with.
Because you think they're going to be happy?
That's what started to make the monarchy increasingly unpopular and increase
it's doing pretty well.
Republicanism.
It's doing pretty well.
I would say I was veering to the Republican
final word.
line. However, the Queen didn't address these things that King Charles is doing. King Charles is modernising the royal family for the better.
Did you see the turnout at the Queen's funeral and the absolute general sorrow with which her passing was greeted, not just in this country, but from millions, billions of people around the world? She was the most successful monarch.
And let's not try and rewrite
However, but you do it all the time. She wasn't popular
Sean
in Ireland.
Bailey,
I'll leave it there.
Alison Pearson, my superstar panel with me all night. But coming up with Harry and Meghan, giving coronation organisers a headache by selfishly refusing to confirm their attendance should the King revoke the treacherous pair's invites. My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Gamble and Phil Dampier, weigh in soon. But next, as the extraordinary two-day police raid on Nicola Sturgeon's home finally comes to an end, is the SNP now finished as a political force? Well, whom's a useless backer? Austin Sheridan, former Scottish editor of the Daily Telegraph, Alan Cochrane, and Commons leader of Alex Salmond's Alba party, Neil Hanvey, do battle. And what's going to be an incredible clash straight after the break. But what do you think? Dan at gbnews.uk. Vote in our poll at GB News. The results and the clash straight after the break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us four, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Lady Colin Campbell and Anne Widdecombe on the way, but it's time now for The Clash. And the dramatic two-day search of Nicola Sturgeon's house by police has come to an end after her husband Peter Murrell's arrest yesterday morning. Murrell, the former chief executive of the SNP, was released without charge last night, but images of scores of uniformed officers searching their home and party headquarters have sent shockwaves through the separatist movement and across Scotland. The 58-year-old's arrest was in connection with the Police Scotland probe looking into the spending of £600,000 earmarked for the Indie Ref 2 campaign. Meanwhile, Sturgeon pulled out of a climate change event at the Edinburgh Science Festival tonight as police continue to investigate the SNP's funding and finances. And the party Queen Nick officially resigned as leader of less than 10 days ago is now in complete and utter disarray. Senior SNP figures now questioning the timing of the arrest, with some supporters of leadership runner-up Kate Forbes insisting members were duped into voting for continuity candidate Humza Useless. And as a leader is inept as useless, the man whose record as Justice, Health and Transport Minister is unrivalled in its gross incompetence, really equipped to guide his party through this crisis? So tonight, I'm asking, as the police finish their extraordinary raid on the home of their former leader and chief executive, is the SNP finished as a political force? Dan at gbnews.uk, vote in our poll at GBNews. But to debate this now, I'm joined by the Humza Useless supporter, Austin Sheridan, a member of the SNP, former Scottish editor of the Daily Telegraph, Alan Cochrane, and Commons leader of Alex Salmond's Alba party, who really could benefit from this SNP turmoil, Neil Hanvey. So, Alan Cochrane, this is bad news for the SNP, isn't it?
Yeah, they're in a shocking state. They've been expecting something, but nothing as sensational as this. And they're in they don't know which way to turn, I'm afraid. I'm not afraid, actually, I'm quite pleased. The SNP looks in a downward spiral that they can't get out of, and led by a leader who doesn't really know what he's doing. And I suspect that we can celebrate the gradual demise of the SNP. But wait a minute. Not necessarily the end of the independence movement, as I'm sure Mr. Hanvey will tell you shortly. There's another party. In fact, there's two other parties. There's the Alba party, which did nothing at the last election, despite of Alex Salmond saying they were going to sweep the board. And there's also the Scottish Greens, who are frankly a waste of space, but for some reason people vote for them. So the SNP are in deep trouble. Independence is still alive.
Austin Sheridan, your party's collapsing, isn't it?
Absolutely not. I mean, I don't think there's any shying away from the fact that this has been a difficult period for the SNP, but we're under new leadership.
That's the understatement of the century.
Since we've been under our new leadership, we've continued to lead in the opinion polls in Scotland. Obviously, as I say, it has been difficult. It's been really sad for SNP members. It's been bruising for SNP members to see this go on. But, you know, the SNP are a resilient political party. Humza Yusuf is a resilient leader and a resilient First Minister, and he'll continue to lead Scotland and continue to deliver for the people of Scotland. And I look forward to supporting him over the coming years.
But Austin, Humza today said it was a conspiracy theory that if the police had raided the Sturgeon household earlier, he wouldn't have been elected leader. But it's not a conspiracy theory, is it? It's complete fact. There's absolutely no way he would have won if people knew what was coming down the line, because Kate Forbes only very narrowly lost that leadership election, 52 to 48.
Police Scotland decide when they're going to carry out their actions, no one else. And as I say, so it's up to the police on the timelines that they choose to pursue. In terms of the leadership election, they had a robust leadership election, a very feisty debate. Humza Yusuf won the election. He has a mandate to lead the SNP. Lead the SNP he will, and lead the SNP he will to victory in future elections.
Neil Hanvey, so you're obviously the Commons leader of Alex Salmond's Alba party. Now, look, whatever you think about separatism, and you know I'm completely opposed to it, all of a sudden Salmond looks like a very attractive leader of the movement, doesn't he? But is there a way, given what Alan Cochrane just said, is there a way for you to actually harness that into winning seats?
First of all, I don't think Humza's quite as bad as you portray him to be. Although he
Do you think he's useless? Is he useless?
An enormous challenge that I think he's ill-equipped for, and I don't think he's making the right decisions. It's true that the SNP.
Okay, but would you call him useless? Is he useless?
I'm not going to get into journalistic repartee. I'm a politician, not a journalist. But the SNP is absolutely in a mess, and unless Humza makes some serious changes to his policy platform, then I think the SNP are at very great risk of spiralling out of control. I mean, the lunacy of continuing to pursue GRR and to allow activists to have, like Austin, to attack people online and to make light of assaults on women without any consequence is really not the way.
Which J.K. Rowling called Austin Sheridan out for, actually. But look, Alan Cochrane, I just want to speak for a moment, Alan Cochrane, about the Scottish media and also the UK MSM as well, because you are one of the few people in Scotland who has held Sturgeon's feet to the fire over many years. But isn't it disgraceful, Alan, when you look at the huge focus that the media throughout the UK had on the Boris Johnson Partygate investigation? You know, a misdemeanor every single day they were leading on the story for month after month after month. Yet they'll sit down in front of Sturgeon over the past 2 years and will not even ask her about a missing £600,000.
Well, to be fair, most of the media, or at least some of the media, even in the, should I say, the London media, asked her that question. She said it's nothing to do with her. In other words, she didn't know anything about it. You might remember it was a similar circumstance when she was fighting with Alex Salmond and they had a row in Nicola's house and her husband denied all knowledge of it. I think he was making the mince or something or having a shower. He said he never discussed party problems with his wife. Now, this is all rubbish. She must have known something about it. And talking to senior lawyers today, I discover that they all say she must be interviewed by the police on this missing money.
Well, she says she hasn't been asked yet. She says she hasn't been asked yet. Neil Hanvey, you wanted to come in there, sorry?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I understand Alan taking that position, but this story was broken by Wings Over Scotland 3 years ago. This issue has been alive in Scottish online media for a long period of time. Stuart Campbell tweeted this week that he informed journalists across the country about this years ago.
Totally. And they put all their effort into a birthday cake at Downing Street. I completely agree with you. Austin Sheridan, how does useless turn this around? Because you're cratering in the polls. This police investigation isn't going away. What's his strategy? What's his plan? You were one of his earliest supporters.
Yeah, well, Humza's useless strategy is to, first of all, deliver independence. That is our strategy. It's always been the SNP strategy. And our strategy for doing that is going to be reigniting their campaign and moving the dial on independence. It's just a shame that Neil Hanvey, as a nationalist MP, is again on here advocating that we shouldn't stand up for the democratic vote in Scotland's national parliament for gender recognition reform. Any politician worth their salt who believes in independence would back up the democratic wishes of Scotland's national parliament. Whether you agree with them or not, we had the debate, and in the Scottish Parliament, the majority of MSPs voted for gender recognition reform. Neil, it's about time you started respecting democracy as well.
OK, thank you all. And obviously, we do have to clarify this is an...
Where was it in the manifesto? Nowhere.
Good point. Good point. Thank you all. I'm going to call time on that because I do just want to say, of course, that this is an active investigation, lots of contempt laws that mean we can't talk in detail about what the police are investigating. And, of course, Nicola Sturgeon has made it clear that she will cooperate with the police if she is asked to, as have the SNP. So thank you to the SNP backer, Austin Sheridan, former Scottish editor of the Daily Telegraph, Alan Cochrane, and Commons leader of the Alba Party, Neil Hanvey. But who do you agree with here? As the police end this raid on the house of Murrell and Sturgeon, is the SNP finished? Ran on Twitter writes, Sturgeon is And hopefully so is the fawning self-entitled clique she surrounded herself with. For the SNP to survive, it needs a sharp break with the direction of recent years. From Charlie, of course not. They are the governing party and will no doubt have power once again in 2024. And Sean writes, the SNP are fake nationalists who want fake independence because they want independence from the UK, but then want to join the EU and immediately lose their independence. I know, that's something that blows my mind on a constant basis. Actually, your verdict now in. 83% of you say the SNP is now finished as a political force. 17% of you say they're still in the race. Coming up, as Channel 4 runs a sick naked education show and the militant National Education Union forces schools to support drag queen story time, why is the left-wing establishment intent on pushing their extreme gender ideology on children? Former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe weighs in soon. But next, with Harry and Meghan giving coronation organisers a headache by selfishly refusing to confirm they're coming, should the King just revoke the treacherous pair's invites right now? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, return next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss? Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for our royal masterminds, and we might be only 29 days from the coronation, but the troublesome pair, Harry and Meghan, still causing mayhem by refusing to disclose whether they have accepted the palace's generous invitation, even though the RSVP deadline was on Monday. So despite the Ginger Winger's unending complaints over the need for national protection, he seems to have no issue delaying the intricate preparations that include seating plans and, crucially, VIP security. So, with the Sussexes causing maximum disruption for the royal family, should King Charles just rescind their invite? Well, with me now, my royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. Lady C, I just say they should not come now. They've missed the deadline, but you're a little bit more flexible on this.
Well, yes, because I think in fairness, this is, the king understands that his son is very troubled and that his son has major problems, and he doesn't want to do anything that would push him over the edge into the possibility of doing something irrevocable. So I understand the king's concerns. Every parent will understand the concerns of a parent for a very troubled child. But that doesn't really excuse the fact that it's pretty shocking manners. And quite frankly, Meghan, who is ostensibly a little bit saner, supposedly, than Harry, and was brought up in a good, proper Catholic school, should understand that, aside from anything else, it's shockingly bad manners, and none of this is acceptable. So he might have a free pass because he's got all sorts of problems, but she really doesn't have one because she's made absolutely sure that she's very canny to cover up any of her failings.
Well, of course, sources close to Harry this week claimed that he'd been totally honest with the US authorities about his previous drug use. So if so, he's definitely had a lot of special treatment. But look, moving away from that, Phil, I personally think he's had his chance now. He's had his chance. He had weeks and weeks and weeks to RSVP. The invite should be rescinded, shouldn't it?
Yeah, good evening, Dan. I think you'd like to rescind it. I'd like to rescind it. I'm sure Lady C would like to rescind it. But I just think that the King's not going to do it. He's made this policy. He's going to stick to it. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I said to you that I thought that Harry and Meghan were actually struggling to make up their minds. I think it's gone way beyond that now. I think they're just playing games. It's giving them a sort of sense of control. It's giving them a sense of power. It's giving them a sense of being at the sort of centre of things. And I just think they're doing it for selfish reasons. But it's totally disrespectful. It's disrespectful to the King. It's disrespectful to the other royals, and most of all, it's disrespectful, as you say, to the people trying to organise it. I mean, people are working round the clock to try and organise this thing, and he's just not making a decision. So it's very, very rude. But he doesn't have any problem getting on a plane to come over for his court cases, does he? But he can't make up his mind about this.
Well, exactly. I mean, Lady C, this is without any doubt the most important day of his father's life. Doesn't it say so much about Harry the man, the fact that he wants to cause stress to his dad? He actually wants to make things more difficult for Charles. It's almost sadistic.
Absolutely sadistic. And it shows that he has a very nasty, cruel streak in his nature, and that he really has no empathy. And it also shows he has not only no respect for his father and for the institution which has given him the platform that he has, but it also shows he has absolutely no respect for this country or for the Commonwealth. I mean, he shows he's absolutely not fit for purpose.
No, indeed. OK, so let's talk about the balcony, because, of course, that's going to be one of the big moments of the coronation weekend. And, Phil, it's been decided that even if Harry and Meghan do decide to grace us with their presence, they're not going to be there. Only working royals will appear on the balcony. That also means Andrew won't be on the balcony. Neither will Eugenie or Beatrice. Do you think that's right? Because, of course, there have been rumours over the past couple of weeks that Harry and Meghan were trying to demand a balcony place if they chose to come.
No, it's absolutely the right decision. I mean, none of them are working royals anymore. No prospects of them becoming working royals in the future. So it's quite right, they shouldn't be there. I mean, Andrew tried to make a bit of a comeback the other week when he went to the Royal Victoria Order ceremony. That was private. I think the King allowed that because it was private. There weren't any photographs. But there's no way in the world he could be on the balcony, and no way in the world that Harry and Meghan out or their children with them could be on the balcony. So I think that decision's been made, and they will stick to that. And that's probably one of the things they resent.
Well, of course they resent that, Lady C. But do you think they should have been allowed on the balcony? Would that have been a way for King Charles to show a bit of, I guess, compromise, you might say?
Absolutely not. They have no business on the balcony. Personally speaking, I think they shouldn't have been asked at all, but I get why his father wanted him there. But no, absolutely, they should not be on the balcony. And quite frankly, if they were tucked in a cupboard, that's sort of where they should be, as far as I'm concerned. I think they're a total disgrace to themselves and to humanity. I think there's no excuse for their, aside from anything else, their bad manners. At this stage, it's just bad manners.
What do you think, Lady C, about the fact that even if they go to the coronation, and even if they decide to take their young children, their kids will also have no official role? Because, of course, it was announced which youngsters were going to be part of the coronation. It includes Prince George, it includes the children of the Chomleys, Lady Chomley, but no room for Harry and Meghan's children. Do you think that's the right decision?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I mean, first of all, they haven't even been brought up here. You know, they have been tucked out of view the whole time. Why would they now all of a sudden be exhibited? I think they have no business being there. And it's insofar as Harry and Meghan themselves, I personally would prefer to see them not there. But of course, we are doubtless going to see them because they cannot resist a photo op. And the only reason why they will not come if they don't come is because it turns out to be in their financial interest and that they can spin some yarn that will pay them good dividends down the line by not being there. Otherwise, they're definitely going to be there. And she's going to be there with her frowsy Joan Collins walk, as if she's sashing down some, exhibiting herself down some catwalk. I mean, honestly, you know, the lack of dignity and the exhibitionism that the two of them are subject to. And as for his walk, I mean, really, you know, you talk about...
You're making me laugh, Lady C.
Well, he is very cocky, and his walk is cocky.
No, he is.
Every meaning of the word.
He is. I'm not disagreeing. I just love the way you phrase it. Phil, some suggestion that Harry and Meghan might be annoyed because I think Camilla's grandchildren being given a formal role.
Yeah, I think we're going to get, it was all boys announced the other day, wasn't it? I think we're going to get girls announced as well. Well, you know, it's their fault for missing out, isn't it? They can't have their cake and eat it, can they? If they've decided to go and they decide to bring up their kids as Americans, they can hardly complain if they're not taking part. I mean, you just can't have it both ways. So they just haven't got a leg to stand on when it comes to this, I'm afraid.
Which, of course, Fergie, the Duchess of York, that's exactly what she said this week, which I thought was fascinating too. Our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell, Phil Dampier, have a brilliant Easter break and we will see you next week. But coming up, as senior SNP figures raise serious questions about the timing of the police raid and arrest of Peter Murrell, was the party's membership duped into voting for Queen Nick's hand-picked successor, Humza Useless? That's the big debate when my Superstar panel returns soon. But first, as Channel 4 shocks the nation with a sick, naked education show, why is the left-wing establishment intent on pushing their extreme gender ideology on children? Former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe with her unflinching verdict straight after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Time now for Big Witty Style with former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe. And parents across the country may be answering some pretty awkward questions from their children soon, as the hard-left National Education Union voted yesterday to support Drag Queen Storytime to help challenge the heteronormative culture and curriculum that dominates education. But it's not just schools that are pushing their woke gender ideology onto our kids. This week, Channel 4 jumped on this baffling bandwagon with a new show called Naked Education, in which kids as young as 14 are forced to sit and watch grown adults parade naked in front of them in the mainstream media's latest perverted pursuit of social progress. Watch this.
Physical? I couldn't look at them. I don't think my cat's even got that much hair.
You're giggling quite a lot back there.
I'm always the one that giggles.
Bobby, how do you feel?
I feel fine. Not even bothered.
Elliot, you've got naked people standing in front of you.
Yes, I do.
Is this a new thing, a new experience? I'm guessing it probably is.
Yeah, it is a bit.
I mean, Anne, I'm speechless. I'm very rarely speechless. I'm speechless. What were Channel 4 thinking?
Well, I'm pretty speechless myself. It is appalling. I mean, seriously appalling. What is more appalling is that the government is doing absolutely nothing. It's just sitting on his backside and saying, oh dear. It's doing absolutely nothing about this, while children are being fed the most inappropriate material and being indoctrinated at the same time to believe this is normal, this is acceptable behaviour. And people parading naked in front of them, this is acceptable, this is something educational. It is so appalling, it defies description, and the government is doing nothing. Now, we know that parents are up in arms in different areas and in different parts of the country. I think the parents have got to get some concerted action going between them and just simply start taking the kids out of school. until the schools act in a more responsible fashion.
What did you make of this National Education Union plan to actually encourage more drag queen story times? It feels like they're almost purposefully now leaning into this.
Absolutely. And whatever happened to childhood innocence? That's the first question you've got to ask. Second question you've got to ask is whatever happened to the protection of children so that you make sure that they find out about these things at appropriate stages and under parental supervision and with parental guidance. Why? Because the parents know the children much better than anybody else does. I mean, this is just the culmination now of a very long process. You know, we have children able to obtain contraception when they're underage and their parents must not be told.
Well, yeah,
children able to announce they change gender and the parents must not be told. Now, that is something government can tackle. All parents of underage children, and certainly when they're under 16, have the right to know every last thing that is happening to those children.
Well, no, indeed, and Rishi Sunak said all of the right things this week, but as you say, actually, this needs policy, doesn't it? It needs hard and fast action. Rhetoric is not good enough here.
Well, rhetoric is completely useless. I mean, actions speak louder than words, so where's the action, Rishi? You know, and where is the urgent action, Rishi? How much more of this is going to go on before somebody wakes up and does put a stop to it? What are the headmasters doing? What are the headmistresses doing? Why are they allowing this stuff in their schools? You know, they should be held to account.
No, indeed. And when you look at action, you just have to look at Florida and the governor, Ron DeSantis, proving that actually it is possible to use legislation to stamp out this woke nonsense in schools. No one's saying that adults shouldn't be able to be entertained by drag queens. Of course they should. But in the classroom, it's inappropriate. Anne Whittaker, have a wonderful Easter and we will speak next week, Anne. Thank you so much. But coming up, Olympic medalist and fierce women's rights campaigner Sharon Davies reveals why she's boycotting Nike after the company sparked global outrage by paying a biological man to model their women's leggings and sports bra. She joins me live soon. But next, as the dramatic two-day police raid on Nicola Sturgeon's home comes to an end, but senior SNP figures raise serious questions about the timing of the police operation. Was the party's membership duped into voting for Humza Yousaf? That's the big debate. With my superstar panel, we're back in just 2 minutes' time.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, The search is finally over at the home of Nicola Sturgeon after the astonishing arrest of her husband and party chief executive Peter Murrell. But as senior SNP figures raise serious questions about the timing of the police operation, was the party's membership duped into voting for Queen Nick's hand-picked successor, Humza Useless? That's the big debate with my superstar panel next. And tonight, I'm joined by Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicole. As the King bends the knee to the woke mob by saying he supports an investigation into the royal family's links to slavery, why is the monarch pledging allegiance to the lefty rag The Guardian? Free speech champion Toby Young says the palace are wrong to be led down the rabbit hole of reparations. He's uncancelled later this hour. As Nike pays a biological man to model their women's leggings and sports bras. Should there be a boycott against the company for what some are calling an insult to women? Or defender of women's rights and Olympic medalist swimmer Sharon Davies says she will not wear the swoosh ever again in the latest example of go woke, go broke. And as the Blazers in English cricket declared that banter is a swear word and ban it in the dressing rooms, is this an absurd overreaction to the Yorkshire racism scandal? We pitched that one up in the media buzz. And after winning selection at the Battle of Waterlooville yesterday, will Suella Braverman be victorious again when I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass? We're going to have our first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, by the way. Hot off the press, that's in mere moments, right after Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. Tonight's top story on GB News: efforts to weed out hundreds of potentially corrupt police officers from Britain's biggest force are underway. Counter-terrorism officers, along with those who tackle serious organised crime, have been drafted in to help clean up the Metropolitan Police. Of more than 1,000 cases, nearly 700 will now be reassessed, with almost 200 referred to formal risk management or vetting. Former senior investigating officer at the Met, Simon Harding, says vetting should be an absolute priority.
Taken away that kind of process of vetting, which helped identify people at a very early stage. Yes, people would get through. When you cross over from force to force, because you're already sort of branded, if you like, a police officer, the vetting levels aren't necessarily as high as they would be. So, and that can cause a problem. But the intelligence that comes with that person should follow them, obviously, and you should be able to see that. But, you know, I still think there's, and I think everyone does, the level of vetting needs to be much, much stronger.
Police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry on Easter Monday. That's after MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe following the shooting of senior detective John Caldwell. The PSNI says there's strong intelligence that attacks are being planned. A man who murdered his pregnant wife by pushing her off the edge of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh has been jailed for 20 years. CCTV images have been released showing Kashif Anwar and his wife, Fawzia Javed, walking behind him. The 29-year-old pushed his wife, who was 17 weeks pregnant, down the hill. She fell 50 feet and sustained multiple blunt force injuries. Before dying, though, she managed to tell a woman nearby that her husband had been behind the attack. There's been more violence on the streets of Paris today as protesters continue to demonstrate against the proposed pension bill. They set fire to one of President Emmanuel Macron's favourite restaurants and clashed with riot police. There have been pockets of violence in France since January, but the protests have mostly, and so far, been peaceful. The King has signalled his support for research into the British monarchy's historical links with transatlantic slavery. King Charles and the Queen Consort have meanwhile been at a Maundy Thursday service today in York, where the monarch presented specially minted coins to local people, thanking them for their outstanding Christian service. The royals were greeted by well-wishers, as well as a handful of demonstrators holding banners reading "Not My King." You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News. More now from Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages, hot off the press. And The Independent leads with travel disruption over the Easter weekend, with long queues at Dover and French protests blocking roads as 2 million Brits are expected to head abroad. The Daily Star declares Mamma Mia as furious Italian politicians demand a ban on English words in official documents, with £90,000 fines to be dished out for the use of the word deadline. God, they really hate us, don't they? And The Express writes that Ukraine will fight to the very last man rather than negotiate with Putin. My superstar panel return now. The author and top Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Now, Nicola Sturgeon's bombshell resignation 7 weeks ago rocked Scotland and sent shockwaves across the UK. However, the real reasons behind her departure are now being called into question after her husband, former SNP Chief Exec Peter Murrell, was sensationally arrested by Police Scotland yesterday before the force's officers descended on the couple's Glasgow home in a dramatic police search witnessed by the nation. The timing of Murrell's arrest in connection with the police investigation into the SNP's finances, crucially, came just a week after Humza Eustace was elected as Sturgeon's replacement in a vote that saw Sturgeon's preferred continuity candidate just narrowly beat rival Kate Forbes. Allies of Forbes are now lashing out. They are insisting that the leadership race would have ended differently if voters had known about the scandals engulfing the party. One senior SNP figure said, if the police had announced this was going to happen when it should have been announced, then Kate Forbes would be First Minister. The SNP's former Justice Secretary Keith Brown, he's now under pressure to reveal details of a meeting with Scotland's police chief just a week before Sturgeon resigned. While Jim Sillars, a former SNP deputy leader, told the Daily Telegraph, I think the public are asking questions that the police have to answer. When was Ms Sturgeon told about the arrest? Was she given fair warning? Did that have an effect on the date of the leadership election? That's what the public are asking, and that's a legitimate question for the police. Now, a spokesperson for the former First Minister denied she was given any warning, saying Sturgeon has no prior knowledge of the action or intentions of Police Scotland, and they say she'll fully cooperate with the police. Police Scotland themselves are saying a 58-year-old man who was arrested as a suspect earlier today, Wednesday the 5th of April 2023, so yesterday, in connection with the ongoing investigation into the funding and finances of the SNP, has been released without charge pending further investigation. As the investigation is ongoing, we are unable to comment further. Now, isn't it interesting, considering the daily media obsession with Boris Johnson's cake during Partygate, that the Liberal media across the UK have barely asked any questions of their beloved Queen Nick over this long-running scandal? A glaring double standard that displays how far the activist MSM has fallen. So, look, so much we can't say at this point, Alison Pearson, but there is a lot that we can. Do you think Kate Forbes supporters are right to feel duped? Because I think it's right what that SNP senior source says. If this police raid had happened earlier, she would be First Minister right now, because they would have wanted a clean break.
Absolutely, and I think Kate Forbes and her team should be asking for a rerun. She got 48% to Mr Eustace's 52%.
And they like reruns with that voting margin, don't they?
We have to tread a bit carefully, but there are lots of very, very strange things going on, Dan, aren't there? So Nicola Sturgeon, who looked like she was full steam ahead for a second referendum, suddenly so I know in my heart that now is the right time to go. What could have prompted that change of heart? She's an extremely ambitious control freak. Why did she suddenly cede power? It's there's a lot of very, very odd things going on here. I think Kate Forbes has been extremely hard done by, and I think there are suspicious things as well. The contest for the First Minister is normally much longer. This was 6 weeks. The Chief of Police in Scotland resigned around the time of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. There was a spate of other high-profile resignations. It's an amazing story, partly because she was so mean about Boris Johnson. You know, she absolutely hated him, didn't she? And she made so much of Boris's predicament. So I'm absolutely thrilled. It's House of Cards meets the Tartan McMafia meets the Macbeths. We look forward to the unfolding details over the coming months. That's all I can say.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Sean Bailey, look, as someone who was caught up in that Partygate obsession of the media, they were absolutely obsessed over what were complete misdemeanours, fixed penalty notice, whether Boris Johnson had a piece of cake. Then you'll see the likes of Beth Rigby on Sly News sit down with Nicola Sturgeon and fawn over her without asking one question about the SNP's finances. This hasn't been a secret. Everyone knows what's been going on. Why has the media allowed the SNP and Sturgeon to get away with so much when they have an intense focus on Boris over Partygate?
Thank God for the Wings of Scotland. So the Wings of Scotland is the blogger, a pro-independence blogger, actually, who brought light on this and then started the whole circus going, was a spark. I think there's a few things to say. If I was Kate Forbes, I absolutely would be asking for a rerun. There is no way that a continuity candidate, as identified by himself, Hamza, would have changed the vote with this link. He's so closely linked to Nicola Sturgeon, the vote would have changed. And I actually think if they don't have a rerun, they'll come to regret this because they will fail at the ballot box. He's linked to Nicola Sturgeon is horrendous. And the other thing that I didn't like is they've lost this money, which was for an independence vote, and he's just now put it on the Scottish public purse with his minister for independence, which I think is a liberty, and I think there's something needs to be done there.
Of course, because at this point we don't know exactly what the SNP's defence is going to be, but what we do know and what is on the public record is that there were these two huge crowdfunding campaigns launched for separatism, and that's where the problem started. Amy Nicole, Useless would not be First Minister, would he? Kate Forbes would be First Minister if this arrest had happened just a couple of weeks earlier. There's literally, during the election campaign, there is so much footage of Useless praising Murat, saying he's an absolutely brilliant party chief executive.
But as you said yourself, it's been a fairly open secret that this was coming. This was in the pipeline. So I don't think it would...
Well, yeah, the police investigation has been out there.
From the SNP membership. And I think the police timing, it would have caused a problem either way, because if they had put it during the leadership candidate, Hamza Yousaf would be lashing out, saying it was unfair. So the police couldn't really time it in a way that wasn't going to upset either of these two camps.
It's not about upsetting either of the two camps.
Well,
it's about doing their job. Because the other problem that the SNP have now, they've put the police in a very funky place. Because if the police are not seen to act with a really laser-focused, strident, hobnail boots in this arena, they will come under scrutiny, because the ex-police chief resigning at very short notice in the middle of this, now the public are expecting the police to take this bunch of people to task.
Could they take it any more seriously? They've turned up with a spade and a tent as if we're delving into Fred and Rose West.
Actually, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting for a second they're not, but what the public will expect is a robust outcome. They don't want to hear any mealy-mouthed words. They'll want something to happen. And I'll tell you why, sorry, just to interrupt you, I'll tell you why. This was a crowd-funded thing. The reason I use the words Wings of Scotland, when this blogger found out the money had gone, he tweeted the words, "We've been robbed." This was something that the Scottish people, a certain group of Scottish people, did from their heart, and now they feel very hard done by.
And of course, we do have to stress open police investigation.
Well, we don't know anything certain at all at the moment, but we do know that we're quibbling over £600,000, which to Tory sleaze is pocket change.
But Amy, I think the difference is, as Sean points out, this was money raised from supporters of separatism. It was money
from the membership.
That the membership chose to donate.
But
so that is precious money. But look, we don't know what happened to the money, of course.
They might still have it.
Suppose it to the £113 million that Michelle
what we do know,
it's just whataboutery.
We're seeing now the dangers of Scotland effectively being run as a one-party state. It's been Nicola Sturgeon's fiefdom. I think the Scottish media, with the few exceptions, have been absolutely supine. She's been not had any proper scrutiny. I've got friends up in Scotland. They've been sending for months. In fact, I've shared with you, Mr. Wootton, haven't I? Swirling rumours about whatever, some very, very stinky potential things going on. So I think this has been a failure of the media. And as you say, Nicola Sturgeon's resignation was presented as the BBC News, a sort of Joan of Arc leaves us. And I'm thinking, no one says, is she potentially, is there a cloud under which she could possibly be leaving?
And ITV News and Sky News treating her as a sort of departing leader who was going by her own choice. Well, I don't believe that.
No.
I don't believe that.
But we
look, we do
don't
just
know
have to stress.
anything.
No, of course we don't. And I am going to stress that, of course, that Nicola Sturgeon has always made absolutely abundantly clear that she knows nothing about this money. She also says that she had no prior knowledge of the police raid, and her spokesperson has insisted that she will cooperate with Police Scotland. Now, the witch hunt in Manhattan had Trump supporters in uproar, but none more so than Congresswoman in Georgia and political firebrand, to say the least, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Speaking on Fox News last night, she was less than impressed by the sight of Trump's arrest. Watch this.
Really quick, since you were just there, but Mayor Adams described New York as, quote, his home. How did his home look? Pretty neat and tidy?
No, his home is disgusting. I compared it to what I called Gotham City. The streets are filthy. They're covered with people basically dying on drugs. They can't even stand up. They're falling over. There's so much crime in the city. I can't comprehend how people live there. It was repulsive. It smells bad. And I think it's a terrible place.
Now, just in case you thought Marjorie was overreacting, these were some of the scenes in New York on Tuesday.
Why are you going in here and calling all the white people in here racist?
No, I'm calling them dumb Republicans.
No, you're calling them racist.
Yeah,
you're calling the
all white people are racist. All white people are racist.
Why are you trying to instigate violence right now?
Because I'm black and I like violence.
Yeah?
I'm an animal. I'm an animal. I'm a black animal. I'm a black animal. Let's kill all white people.
You ever seen performance art? Obviously not, because
Here's my manager.
Republicans have no
My manager.
This is called
manager.
Marjorie was actually wrong about one thing. That's scarier than Gotham City. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Alison Pearson, do stand by, because coming up with the England-Wales cricket board, I couldn't believe this, that banter is now a swear word and it must be banned from all dressing rooms. Do these constant attempts to rewrite the English language really represent progress? My superstar panel will get stuck into that one soon. But next, as Nike pays a biological man to model their women's leggings and sports bras, should there be a boycott against the company for what some are calling an insult to women? Well, our country's top defender of women's rights, especially when it comes to sport, Olympic medalist Sharon Davies says she will not wear the swoosh again, and she's going to reveal why straight after the break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us four, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Now, meet Nike Women's new ambassador, the trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney. Mulvaney is someone who has not had any gender reassignment surgery, but she was still paid by the global brand to manage their women's wear, including leggings and a sports bra. Watch. This comes after Budweiser, the beer company behind Bud Light, signed up the activist to flog beer for a basketball tournament, despite the fact Mulvaney knows nothing about the sport. She admits that. And Nike's decision to give sponsorship to Mulvaney, and not a biological woman, could be a classic case of go woke, go broke, with objectors pledging to boycott the company. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by women's rights campaigner and Olympic medalist Sharon Davies. So, Sharon, will you buy Nike after this? Because there's a big boycott going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so frustrating, isn't it? We make 2 steps forward, what with World Athletics and then Swim England, you know, in this country, protecting women's sport, and then this happens. It feels like it's just a parody of what women are. And in the past, it was always seen as an insult when people say, run like a girl. And here we've got somebody behaving, in a way that's very unsportslike, it's very unathletic. And it's just so frustrating when only 1% of the US sponsorship dollar in the whole of the USA goes to actual females in sport, that they would then do this. It just seems like literally like a kick in the teeth constantly.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know how much I love women's sport, and there's so many amazing women's athletes who get nothing from Nike and are at the top of their game. And then you've got Dylan Mulvaney, right? And sure, look, I want Dylan to be happy. Go and be happy, Dylan. But you're not a woman. You're certainly not a sportswoman. And surely the crucial thing here, Sharon, is that Dylan Mulvaney has a man's body. So how on earth? Because, the whole thing with women's sport, and I know a lot of female athletes, it's all about sports bras for people with different sized breasts. It's about how you wear particular clothing when you have your periods. There's all of these issues that Dylan Mulvaney doesn't have to deal with any of.
It doesn't apply, to Dylan Mulvaney. I mean, Dylan Mulvaney is also being paid to promote Tampax, another product that they will never lead ever in their life. It's just so incredibly frustrating. And like you said, sports bras, when there is nothing to put in the sports bra, when it's really important that the women get proper support when they do sport. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, for a long time, they sponsored Allyson Felix, one of the world's most incredible track athletes. And then when Allyson got pregnant, they reduced her sponsorship by 70% when she had something happen to her that happens only to women. And so she left, and it's just this total disdain that women are being treated to at the moment. And particularly in the world of sport where physiology makes so much difference.
I know. I mean, you look at that video and it is almost like, are they just taking the piss now? It's so frustrating. But look, another really important example, Sharon, of women's sports potentially in danger this week. So this is the 42-year-old trans golfer, Brianna Gill, who actually won the Australian Women's Classic on the PGA Tour of Australasia. This image of the victory posted by the official tour's Twitter page was actually taken down after a huge backlash. But Sharon, our Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, is suggesting quite a landmark change to the law that would only allow biological women access to same-sex spaces in, crucially, sporting competitions. So even though athletes like Jill have undertaken gender reassignment surgery, do you still believe they have an unfair advantage?
Well, they do. I mean, we have 17 peer-reviewed studies in the world, and every single one of them says that we cannot mitigate against male puberty advantage. And that's why when we have golf, we have two different tees. A women's tee is different from the men's tee for obvious reasons. They hit it a lot further. So you are starting the game of golf knowing this person has a physical advantage before you even hit a ball. And that was the same whether it's on the track or in the swimming pool. And that's the whole point. This is about being based on science and fact. And you know how much I love facts, right? That's how I do it. I do it factually with things that have been proved. There's not a single study in the world that proves that you can mitigate against male puberty. So we're literally starting off these women's competitions knowing they have a disadvantage. And it doesn't happen in the men's competitions because transgender men, biological females, vastly opt to carry on and compete with the women however they identify, which nobody has a problem with. So this is just about fair sport, and you mentioned obviously Kemi working very hard on the Equality Act. The Equalities Act was from 2010, and when it was actually drafted they used the word sex, and believe me, in 2010 they meant biological sex, but somehow between then and now that has sort of morphed into anything. And so what we're trying to do is to be able to get back that terminology so that it actually means what it was meant to mean when it was drafted, so that it could protect biological females to safe spaces, to fair sport, and to correct stats, things like taking consensuses and stats, with regards to crime. It's really important that we have genuine figures so we know how to deal with things.
Couldn't agree more. And we're with you on this, so we're going to keep with you on this. And I think you make a very important point. Believing in facts and believing in science doesn't make you anti-trans. It doesn't make you a transphobe. It makes you someone who wants to protect women's rights. And that's a really important part of this conversation. That's what I love about what you're doing. You focus on the science.
Yeah, and Dan, it's also about finding a place for trans athletes as well.
Yeah,
this isn't about sport not being for everybody. It absolutely is. It just has to be the right place.
Yeah.
And if that's not in an open category, let's debate it and add categories if we need to.
Yeah.
That's what they've done in boxing.
Indeed,
but if we can't talk about it, then we can't resolve the problem.
Absolutely, but the thing that makes me sick about the Dylan Mulvaney thing, Dylan Mulvaney isn't an athlete. Dylan Mulvaney is an attention seeker. Dylan Mulvaney is a provocateur. That's fine. But Nike should be very careful because, I've been a big fan of Nike, but I really don't want to be after this.
You can protest, isn't it? It's what's left for us at the moment because nobody really seems to be listening to the general public. And that's what seems to be incredibly frustrating. So the only way we can actually make these companies and make governments listen is to boycott with our wallet. And that's kind of...
Go woke, go broke. It's the only thing they listen to. Disney's listening, Netflix is listening. It's what you've got to do. Sharon Davies, so good to speak. Have a brilliant Easter. But coming up in Uncanceled is Buckingham Palace publicly supported an investigation into their own historic links to the slave trade. Is King Charles wise to open the reparation floodgates? Founder and director of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young, gives his expert analysis later. But next in the media buzz, as the word banter is declared a swear word by English and Welsh cricket, who have banned banter in dressing rooms, banned it, yep. Is the constant clampdown on our everyday language beginning to wear thin? My superstar panel have their say next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz, and more front pages have just been delivered. The Daily Telegraph leads with the growing concerns of an attack targeting police in Northern Ireland. The paper reports There's strong intelligence suggesting one could take place before the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement on the 10th of April. Of course, Joe Biden, the US president, visiting next week. The Sun writes that misery awaits millions of Brits heading away for the Easter break due to protests and strikes in France. There's always strikes in France. And the Daily Mail leads with King Charles backing new research over slavery links with the monarchy, fueling calls for Britain to pay reparations. We've got the latest developments on this with Toby Young coming up very shortly. But before that, my superstar panel return. The author and Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Well, if you didn't think the left's war on words could get any more insane, the England and Wales Cricket Board have now banned banter from dressing rooms and classified it as a swear word, with players warned of zero tolerance for using abusive language under the guise of leg pulling. The bizarre move comes after the bruising Yorkshire racism scandal that saw several Asian cricketers speak out against alleged racial abuse dressed up as banter, including the now dismissed racism claim by Azim Rafiq against the former England captain Michael Vaughan that led to his egregious cancellation by the BBC. And responding to the new move, the ECB's new chief exec, Richard Gould, said nobody can be in any illusion of the standards required now. They know now what the base level is and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. We have seen that within dressing rooms, banter used to be a word you could use. Banter is a swear word now. It is not acceptable. Sean Bailey, look, I really worry that this is actually going to take away a lot of the joy that people have playing sport, right? One of the things that people love about sport is the dressing room banter, and that's part of being British as well, isn't it? Are we now so hypersensitive that banter has to be banned?
Look, this shows two things. Firstly, it shows that they didn't actually know what to do and they wanted to signal their virtue. If you ban banter, you've effectively banned conversation. Anything could be termed as banter. People are not so stupid as to not realise what's offensive and what isn't. So you can't ban banter.
But we are scared of banter now, aren't we?
Of course we are. It looks like they're actually saying the word banter could not be used, which we have many more offensive words in English lexicon than banter, so that's crazy. But it goes to the core of it. If you really want to include people in a dressing room, if you really want to stamp this out, the banning of something probably won't do it.
But what it's saying, Amy Nicol, is if, I don't know, I'm just thinking, if there was a gay player in the team and someone joked, one of their teammates joked, "Oh, stop acting like a big girl's blouse. You're out. You're fired. Your sporting career is over." That is ridiculous.
OK, and if that repeatedly upset the person and then they could have licensed to say it over and over again by going, "It's just banter," that's the problem, because you can
So you want banter to be banned?
Bullying can be disguised by saying it's banter.
OK, so you want banter to be banned?
That is a problem. And actually, I looked into some statistics around this, because I know you love a stat.
No, well, bring me the stats in a second, but just before that, can you just answer my question?
OK.
Do you want
Maybe
banter to be banned?
Oh, hang on a minute.
It's a very simple question. It's just a yes or no.
I'm terrified of the word banter. I absolutely hate when people say the rudest thing and then they go, "It's just banter." That means you can't respond to it. You can't have...
What's your stat?
So
yes, just to clarify, Amy Nicol wants banter banned. What's your stat?
My stat...
Hit me with it.
...is that 2/3 of adults in the UK have felt bullied by people justifying their words by saying, "It's just banter, get over it."
But that's the key thing. They had to justify...
Your mother's a prostitute, it's just banter.
No, but
it's not.
But hold on. If you remove banter, then someone will say it's just a joke. The point is this... the principle is bogus. It's not the banter that's the problem, it's the content of that banter.
Alison Pearson, don't we have to be defending great British banter? It's one of the best things about living in the UK. Like, our banter... You know, if you move to America, right, they don't do good banter.
I think Amy's missing the crucial point here, which is that British men can only communicate via banter. So if you ban banter, entire, 50% of the population is going to be not speaking, because all they can say is jokes. As Sean pointed out earlier, if they suddenly start asking people about how do you feel about how things are going, most British men, banter is in the great tradition of British things. Banter and humour are the great solvents of tension between strangers. So we know we can sort of, someone on the train, how are you doing? Whatever, nice joke. That's the way we break down barriers. And if you do this, my fear is that people will become nervous of speaking in front of, say, Asian players or whatever, that they will censor themselves. They'll think those people can't take a joke.
But that's,
and we will
that's
put
the problem, Alison. You just said it. They can't take a joke. You can't take a joke.
But jokes
and
are...
that's the danger. Some jokes are bullying.
But if someone intends to bully you, disguising it in a joke or not, you're being bullied. I accept that. But let's just... You remember with the Will Smith thing? What made Will Smith out of order, apparently, is he couldn't take a joke.
Hang on a minute.
When he sacked Chris Rock. Chris Rock's response but he's a comedian, it's a joke. And that was a justification for writing Will off, or was it justification for slapping? Who knows? But the point is this, it's not about the banter, it's about the content of the banter.
Do you know what?
And if someone offends you, hold on, if someone offends you, you'll have to tell them that. Just saying we're not banter doesn't mean people won't be offended.
Can I just say that every time we say banter, every time I hear a man say banter, my ovaries shrivel up a little bit.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
But you drain all the fun and spontaneity out of life by saying...
I love banter more than anything. I'm actually not that good at it, but I love being around it. Because it's so funny.
We're campaigning for banter. We're campaigning for banter without abuse.
Amy Nichol's Britain. Amy Nichol's Britain, where King Charles is in a council house after spending all of his money on reparations, and all banter is banned. Now, look, on to a very serious topic. Now, as the lockdown shifts...
Mr Wootton, you just did banter.
Did I do
that was banter. You were good.
That wasn't scripted either, let me tell you. That was off-the-cuff banter. There you go.
Very good banter.
But look, serious topic now. As the lockdown chickens keep coming home to roost, one of the draconian policy's clearest thinking critics, and actually he was my first ever guest here at GBNews, the brilliant Lord Jonathan Sumption, has explored what was really going on at the BBC during those dark 2 years. So speaking to our very own Liam Halligan and our very own superstar panellist Alison Pearson on their brilliant Planet Normal podcast, Sumption explained his view that the corporation essentially became the government's department of doom-mongering. Listen.
BBC, which is probably the most influential single media organ, I'm sorry to be saying that on your podcast, but it's a fact, was consistently pro-lockdown. It was, of course, under threat to its financial model from the government, and it therefore wanted to show that it was good boys. Within the BBC, I know for certain that there were a variety of opinions, but the one which they chose to concentrate on was that the lockdown was a great idea, that people who were sceptical were being antisocial, and there was very little to show that there was an alternative view held by responsible people. As a matter of fact, that still seems to be the position of the BBC. They're still running articles about long COVID and the like, and no articles, or very few articles, about those things that suggest that a mistake was made.
Alison, such an important interview. I think Sumption is one of the most clever and brilliant men in the country.
Yeah.
But what is so shocking, right, is this actually worked for the BBC. Do you remember before the lockdown, Boris was going to be really tough on them and Cummings was saying, absolutely, we're going to abolish the licence fee, we're not giving any access to the BBC. And that all stopped once the BBC became the ultimate propaganda machine for government lockdown policy.
Yeah, as Lord Sumption said, they were good boys, weren't they? They played along nicely. They never put, hardly ever saw any representative of lockdown scepticism at all. I think we've seen in recent months and weeks, haven't we, that starting to unravel. We're living with the consequences of lockdown. I can remember at the height of it, Clive Myrie doing a report from a morgue. No proportion, no sense that most young people were not affected by COVID at all.
And he was the one in intensive care, wasn't he, saying, death, 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 death. Yeah. Which, unfortunately, Clive Myrie happens every single day in intensive care. And I don't see him now reporting on cancer deaths, for example, which have skyrocketed as a result of
Absolutely.
lockdown.
And what they do now is they do the costs of COVID, not the costs of lockdown.
No, they can't admit they were wrong.
They don't want to admit they're wrong.
Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey, Amy Nichol, do stand by, because coming up, after winning her electoral seat and starting the fight back against grooming gangs, could Suella Braverman be in for some deserved recognition tonight? Find out as we reveal tonight's greatest Britain Union jackass very soon. But next, in Uncanceled, is King Charles wrong to openly support an investigation into the royal family's links to the slave trade that could open the floodgates for reparations across the globe? We've got breaking news on this tonight, which Toby Young is going to explore in just 2 minutes' time, so don't go anywhere.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for Uncanceled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And breaking tonight, the King has not ruled out the possibility of paying reparations for the royal family's historical links to the slave trade after he gave his backing to a new research project into the matter. This is royal sources telling the Daily Telegraph tonight that the King was waiting to see the results of the research before deciding on his response. A palace spokesman said the issue of whether the King might decide to pay reparations or make a donation to an appropriate charity amounted to speculation at this stage, but they would not rule anything out. And earlier today on the record, the palace responded to The Guardian saying this is an issue that His Majesty takes profoundly seriously. Charles is now unwittingly dancing to the tune of the militant left wing, who want nothing less than the monarchy and Britain itself to be made bankrupt via historic reparations for the sins of our ancestors centuries ago. So here to unpack this developing story, General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Toby, look, I think this is very dangerous for Charles on a whole load of fronts. Firstly, since when did Buckingham Palace decide that they were going to make announcements of a national significance like this because of a Guardian investigation led by a hard left academic who is currently writing a book slagging off Charles's mother? I mean, I couldn't believe it.
No, it is an extraordinary story. And it does, as you say, seem like Prince Charles contributing to the cost of the guillotine that's going to be erected outside Buckingham Palace and it's going to be used to chop off his head. And, you know, why is the Buckingham Palace, as you say, reacting to a story in The Guardian which is clearly intended to deflect attention from The Guardian's own embarrassment about the revelations of the involvement of its own founder in the slave trade and 9 of the 11 backers of that founder when The Guardian was first set up. And, you know, The Guardian, in response to these hugely, much more embarrassing revelations than these revelations about the royal family, The Guardian's response is to announce that it's going to set aside a fund to make reparations to the victims or the descendants of the victims of the slave trade of £10 million. Sounds like a big number, but The Guardian's total endowment is worth £1 billion, so that's 0.1% of The Guardian's fortune.
10 years, by
10 million over 10 years.
Which is nothing.
Presumably, if Buckingham Palace's response to this research project is to devote 0.1% of the net worth of the royal family to reparations, The Guardian will write a leader saying, more than enough, that's all it needs to do, that's fine.
It just feels at the moment, though, that the royal family are totally gearing all of their messages to the wrong group of people, because the people who they're appealing to are the people who despise them, who want the royal family to fall, like The Guardian. We've seen this week Prince William sign up Jacinda Ardern, you know, the lockdown tyrant of New Zealand, to be his main advisor. Again, someone who is part of that globalist woke mob. I don't really understand what they're doing. And I have to say, Toby, today and this week, I've never missed the late Queen Elizabeth II more.
Yeah, I mean, I fear that King Charles is going to be a woke monarch. I mean, we already know that the coronation is going to include kind of dancing NHS staff members. It's going to celebrate the diversity of contemporary Britain. It's going to be an inclusive coronation. The representatives of the House of Commons have been downgraded compared to the previous coronation. And, you know, he wants to be a woke king. I think he thinks that that's the way to make the monarchy relevant, to win over sceptical young people, to win over Guardian readers. What he doesn't get is that they're never going to be won over. They hate the royal family. They hate everything associated with Britain and its history and heritage. They feel nothing but shame and disgust. They're never going to embrace the royal family. All this kind of behaviour will succeed in doing is antagonising the few people left in this country that actually support the royal family and celebrate King Charles.
Well, exactly. They're out for the total destruction of the royal family. And the thing is, if you open up the reparations issue, actually, it's going to end up costing the British people, isn't it? I mean, King Charles isn't going to have to change his lifestyle. I presume he's not going to sell his palaces or stop travelling in his helicopters, but it could actually, if you go open up this Pandora's box, it could actually end up being incredibly costly to British taxpayers.
Absolutely. And one of the ridiculous things about this is, in a sense, the British people, the British monarchy, the state of Britain has already made reparations. It's already done penance for its involvement in the slave trade, because Britain devoted blood and treasure in the form of the Royal Navy's West Africa Squadron to ending the transatlantic slave trade. Between 1807 and 1860, something like 1,600 slave ships were stopped by the Royal Navy, and over 150,000 slaves were released. We lost lives. We spent an enormous amount of money ending the slave trade. The difference between Britain and other civilizations, other empires involved in slavery, is we're the only one to actually make an attempt to abolish the slave trade. We've done our penance. We've paid for our sins. We don't need to pay again.
No, I know. No one ever talks about that, do they?
They don't. They never
no
talk
one
about
ever
that.
talks about the fact that actually, if it wasn't for Britain, the slave trade may never have been abolished.
Yeah.
You know, it was all down to us. And actually, we spent decades in the early 1800s doing it. And then, of course, the rest of the world followed suit far later. You know, decades later, countries like Brazil and the USA.
Yeah, and you know, if people really are concerned about slavery, why are they focusing on the involvement of one country when virtually every country, every kingdom in the world was involved in slavery? Why are they focusing on what Britain did 200 years ago? What about contemporary slavery? What about focusing on the imprisonment, the enslavement of the Uyghurs, slave labour in North Korea?
For the far left mob, the British royal family is like the walking, talking personification of colonialism, which has become the thing that they hate most. And so it doesn't actually matter what the facts are. And I think that's why Charles is making a big mistake here. He should have been like the late Queen and just let this wash over him.
No, he's going to end up abolishing himself in an effort to decolonise the royal family.
Don't do it, Charles. Don't do it. And stop listening to The Guardian. Actually, that should be the first thing you do. Toby Young, brilliant to have you tonight. We'll see you very soon. But it's time now to reveal tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Alison Pearson, your nominee, please, for Greatest Britain.
My nominee for Greatest Britain is Cheryl Corbell, the mother of Olivia Pratt Corbell, who was so tragically murdered in her own home, 9 years old. And this week, Cheryl gave a magnificent victim statement in a court in Liverpool, showed total defiance of Merseyside gangsters, and was an absolutely moving and shining example of maternal love and devotion.
Yeah, let's have a little listen.
Liv was the light of our lives, a sassy, chatty girl who never ran out of energy. She was a character. She was my baby, and she had amazing qualities and knew what she wanted in life.
utterly heartbreaking. What a brave woman. Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My nominee is the British government for its crackdown on grooming gangs. Senior members of the Labour Party have been silent on this, absolutely silent, and it's great to see Suella Braverman taking a step to remove this crime that's blighting parts of our country, to take some steps against it. That's what I think we should be focusing on.
And Amy Nicol, your nominee.
My Greatest Britain nominee is the National Education Union for seeing through the reports against this and seeing the good in drag queen story time and voting for it in primary schools.
OK. Well, look, there's no competition, is there? Of course, it's got to be Cheryl Corbell, who got through the most difficult week with grace and dignity and poise, and I think she did a great service to Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Uni and Jackass, time now. Alison Pearson, your nominee.
My Jackass is the company Nike, which hired Dylan Mulvaney, a trans woman, to be the new face of their women's bra and sports bra range, despite the fact that Dylan doesn't have any breasts and is still in possession of a penis, so doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, qualify as a woman.
Unbelievable. Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My nominee is Karen Adams, who said any criticism of Hamza Yusuf is racist. All of our politicians need to be scrutinised properly, and this is a ridiculous thing to say. She's just trying to cover the fact that he's actually useless.
And Amy Nicol, your nominee.
My nominee is Kemi Badenoch for her proposals to grab headlines. Amend the Equality Act at the expense of trans people.
Well, I actually don't think she's trying to grab headlines. She's actually trying to make a change to legislation that is going to protect biological women, and she's actually doing it quietly behind the scenes. But look,
Inspector General Dan Wootton.
I'm actually going to go for Karen Adams here and Sean Bailey, because I thought this was such despicable race baiting, actually. Karen Adams doesn't want us to criticise whom's useless, because if we do, we're racist. And just imagine if that's where we end up in our politics. It would also mean we couldn't criticise Sadiq Khan. And he's the worst politician in the whole country, right, Sean Bailey? Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicol, so great to have you tonight. Have a wonderful Easter. I've got to tell you, though, we are back as normal on Monday night at 9 p.m. So please do join us then. Next up, though, it's Headliners. Good night.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good evening, you're with GB News. In a moment, headliners. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines. And the top story today, efforts to weed out hundreds of potentially corrupt police officers from Britain's biggest force is underway. Counter-terrorism officers, along with those who tackle serious organised crime, have been drafted in to help clean up the Metropolitan Police Force. Of more than 1,000 cases, nearly 700 will now be reassessed, with almost 200 referred to formal risk management or vetting. Former senior investigating officer at the Met, Simon Harding, says vetting should be an absolute priority.
Taken away that kind of process of vetting, which helped identify people at a very early stage. Yes, people would get through. When you cross over from force to force, because you're already sort of branded, if you like, a police officer, the vetting levels aren't necessarily as high as they would be. So, and that can cause a problem. But the intelligence that comes with that person should follow them, obviously, and you should be able to see that. But, you know, I still think there's, and I think everyone does, the level of vetting needs to be much, much stronger.
Police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry on Easter Monday. That's after MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe following the shooting of senior detective John Caldwell. The PSNI says there's strong intelligence that attacks are being planned. A man who murdered his pregnant wife by pushing her off the edge of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh has been jailed for 20 years. CCTV images have been released showing Kashif Anwar and his wife, Fawzia Javed, walking behind him. The 29-year-old pushed his wife, who was 17 weeks pregnant, down the hill. She fell 50 feet and sustained multiple blunt force injuries. But before dying, she managed to tell a woman that her husband had been behind the attack. There's more violence today on the streets of Paris as protesters continue to demonstrate against a proposed new pension bill. They set fire to one of President Emmanuel Macron's favourite restaurants and clashed with riot police. There have been pockets of violence in France since January, but the protests have, until today, been mostly peaceful. And the King has signalled his support for research into the British monarchy's historical links with transatlantic slavery. But King Charles and the Queen consort were today at a Maundy Thursday service in York, where the monarch presented specially minted coins to local people, thanking them for their outstanding Christian service. The royals were greeted by well-wishers, as well as a handful of demonstrators holding banners, "Not My King." You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Andrew Doyle. Tonight I'm joined by Josh Howie and Lewis Schaefer, here to go through Friday's newspapers. How are you both?